This week, the Netherlands showed us exactly what the future looks like in the form of unrealized gains taxation, a 36% tax on paper gains. You are forced to liquidate part of your position just to pay for the privilege of holding an asset.
You know, in Europe, if one or two countries are doing it, the rest are going to follow. There's a bunch of people leaving the country and finding ways to escape this tax and go to Dubai or somewhere else that's not Europe.
If you can't own something and have it be protected from these types of unrealized capital gains taxes, then do you really own it at all? And it's really sad to see. I think that people will move with their feet and with their assets.
Bitcoin needs velocity. If everybody just has it sitting there forever, then is it really money? It is peer-to-peer. Go out and use it.
Okay, a millionaire. I'm a young money millionaire.
Hello, and welcome back to the Daily Stack, your daily show live to get all the biggest news in Bitcoin. And we are here this Monday morning to discuss the insane things that are happening over across the pond over in the Netherlands. They are talking about a confiscatory tax, 30%, 36% unrealized gains tax on your Bitcoin, on your stocks, on your bonds, everything that you hope to hold for the future to preserve your wealth and outrun inflation. They want to take it from you. So before we get started, we have two great guests today. We have Natalie Brunell of Coin Stories, of course, and we have Sanjna M, who is running her own Women for Bitcoin program over with Rhino Bitcoin. So we are going to discuss all this today. Let me jump right into the intro and get us started. They have run out of road for decades. Developed countries played the same simple game. Steal 2% of purchasing power a year via currency debasement, kick the can down the road, and hide the rot under a mountain of cheap credit. But as of this morning, U.S. national debt is sitting close to $39 trillion. And we are adding $1 billion of debt every few hours. And now the math is forcing the debt to become predatory as it approaches the exponential knee in the chart. In other words, the debt has entered its terminal phase, and governments are coming for the only resource they have left: you. This week, the Netherlands showed us exactly what the future looks like in the form of unrealized gains taxation, a 36% tax on paper gains you haven't even cashed out to enjoy. Let's look at the math. If your Bitcoin goes from $70,000 to $100,000 on paper, even if you never sold a single sat, you will owe the government over $10,000. You are forced to liquidate part of your position just to pay for the privilege of holding an asset that outperformed their failing currency. And if the market crashes before the bill is due, too bad. The tax is locked in at the earlier valuation. You can turn a real gain into a net loss and permanently lose a chunk of your stack. This law is scheduled to start in 2028. It passed the Dutch House with politicians openly saying, we don't like it either, but we have to. And they are not alone. Erica Payne and the Patriotic Millionaires just told the IMF exactly what the second half of this trap looks like: a global asset registry. They want to map the money and define what is enough. Because when a government is $40 trillion in the hole, enough is whatever you have in your bank account. They're building a digital panopticon to ensure no one escapes the burning house of fiat. Your taxes haven't even gone towards paying the budget in a very long time. Now they're telling you what the taxes are really for: limiting your personal economic power and agency. They want to ensure you never gain the economic velocity to question the authorities who broke this system. Thankfully, we live in a time where the most liquid capital asset in the world is also the most mobile and the most censorship resistant. And of course, we are talking about Bitcoin. And today, I am very glad to be joined by two amazing members of the Bitcoin community. We have Natalie Brunell and we have Sanjna. Hello, good morning, ladies. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yes, absolutely. So we are here to talk about many things, but first I would like to get an introduction of the two of you. Of course, Natalie, you've got a wonderful podcast, but you're also running this Women of Bitcoin Summit. So please tell us what is going on over there.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been my mission to just see more representation in Bitcoin ever since I went to my first Bitcoin conference in 2021 and noticed, oh my goodness, I don't see a lot of women in this room. And it was great and convenient for when it came time to go to the bathroom line, because there was none. And the guys had to wait in a long queue. But I thought, how sad. Such an amazing, apolitical, neutral technology for all of us to embrace and get ahead financially. And so I started my first Women of Bitcoin event with Callie Bailey in 2022. That has grown to be the largest in-person event. Every single year, we're going to host that again in Las Vegas. But we wanted to do more. So I partnered up with Efrat Fenigson and Christine Marie Turner of Abundant Minds, and we created the Women of Bitcoin Digital Summit. We already have more than 850 people registered, which is just insane to think about, especially given the price action of Bitcoin. And that's going to be held online wherever you are. You can attend for free March 4th and 5th of this year. We are so excited, and hopefully we'll get into it a little bit more in this conversation.
Wonderful. And Sanjna, you are doing your own Bitcoin education initiative for women. Please share with us that.
Yes. So it's such an honor to be on with Natalie and Rob. Thanks for having me, Rob. So I actually spoke to you on a Twitter space 2 or 3 years ago when I was talking about Bitcoin education. I started Wiser. I co-founded it with 4 other people. We were focusing on Bitcoin education and doing it in a kind of fun way where we were doing gamified education. Now I've shifted my goal a bit because it's always been on my mind to get more women in the space. It's just something that I've seen through Wiser that we just don't have enough of them in Bitcoin. And it's been so many years. And I've always wondered why there was a big gap in the space. And I think it's just the way we educate people, because all the education we have out there right now is quite technical. We've never had financial literacy in our schools. So it's something that people have picked up themselves after high school, after college. It's something that people have self-taught. And I think it's been super intimidating for women to get into. So it's been my goal to be that intersection of Bitcoin and education for women. It's helping them understand money structurally, not just about the Bitcoin price action, but how the financial system works and why Bitcoin was designed the way it was. So we really go back into the roots of, why money exists, the gold standard, how Bitcoin came about. It's more than just the price, the volatility. It's more about people just understanding why Bitcoin exists. So through Bitcoin for Women and our partnership with the Women of Bitcoin Summit, we're building clear, structured learning paths so people can understand before they decide. We're removing all the hype, the language, and just making it plain, clear, simple for women to understand and get into the space.
Wonderful. And one more question, Natalie, is in your outreach to women about Bitcoin, what has been the largest hurdle? What have you needed to get over first in order to bring them into the space?
Well, I've found that most of my women friends, peers, former classmates or colleagues, they're just really nervous about the volatility. They see it as more of a speculative asset, and they're not interested in trading because they tend to save and invest more conservatively. So it's kind of interesting because after all these years of studying Bitcoin, I view it as the most conservative thing you could invest in. But of course, that short-term price action can really spook people. And so I try to frame it in the way that Bitcoin is really this technology that represents a permissionless open source ledger for everyone around the world to finally have a bank account in some instances for the first time ever. I think the human rights angle is one that really helps women understand Bitcoin because they tend to be more interested in sort of the storytelling, the community building, and really just helping people around the world, that aspect that Bitcoin is so powerful in, as opposed to, sitting in front of a chart, looking at the price going up and down and trying to trade it every millisecond. So I think when you zoom out and focus on just how much Bitcoin brings about these revolutionary property rights in a digital way, it helps a lot of people, not just women, understand that this is something that we all really need to embrace.
Yes, and it is coming up, this event, March 4th and 5th, online. Go and sign up. And the website is womenofbitcoin.io. Let me just bring that up on stage for us so we can take a look at that. But yes, March 4th and 5th, 1 p.m. Eastern. It's all online. It's free. So if you have any women in your life, if you're not a woman listening to this, but you would like them to get a load of Bitcoin and understand what is going on in our world that we love so much and talk about on a daily basis, send them over here. Women of Bitcoin Summit, womenofbitcoin.io.
Yeah,
so
can I just share one more thing? There have been some other digital conferences in the past, and I want to highlight how unique and special this one is going to be because it's really interactive and it's a choose your own adventure. We're actually going to have simultaneous panels going on. So very much you can choose which one. You can switch back and forth between the two. We have excellent, amazing speakers who have been working and building in the space for many years. So with each sort of section that we go through in the conference, you can choose which avenue to take, and then we kind of convene in these networking areas that are all, again, digital, that bring together women from all over the world. So we're really excited to be elevating how these digital conferences are produced and how they run, and we're just so excited for everyone to get involved. Again, more than 850 people have already registered, and it's open to everyone for free.
No, it's absolutely amazing. Very excited to see how you guys do it because yes, there have been plenty of webinars and you can just sit and watch a Zoom, but to bring in the interaction and to be able to participate yourselves, I think is very important, especially for new people who are just getting into the space to give them that hands-on experience with Bitcoin is amazing. So power to you guys. Very excited for this event. And again, it is coming up March 4th and 5th. Okay, let's dive right into our newsletter. This comes out every single Monday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern, straight into your inbox. Today's edition is entitled Netherlands Ignites Global Capital Shock with 36% unrealized gains tax. Decades of reckless spending have reached their breaking point as governments are now turning private wealth to fill the hole. So yeah, let's start off with this story because this was quite the news headline of the week. This has been talked about for months, going back to last summer, but it finally got to the Dutch House of Representatives and they passed it. So we had a big post about this week. Of course, this is one of the Dutch parliament members explaining the tax about how even if you have a paper gain, you did not sell anything, you will still be taxed on it 36% for just having an asset that outruns inflation. So for the two ladies here, I would love to get your opinion. Sanjna, what do you think about this tax? What is going on here? And should we be worried about it coming over to other countries?
Yeah, so I actually live in Belgium. So we're neighboring the Netherlands, and they've introduced something really similar. It's a 10% unrealized capital gains tax. So, in Europe, if one or two countries are doing it, the rest are going to follow. It's just a matter of time. Luckily, it's not coming into effect until 2028, and hopefully there will be some tweaks and, some. I just hope that it doesn't go into effect at this number. But this just makes you realize that you do need to have assets. You do need to have some of your money in assets like Bitcoin. It's for them. It's the only way to carry, like you said, significant capital anywhere in the world. It gives people a way to diversify their savings and understand crypto and Bitcoin and just, make that educated decision before all of this actually goes into effect.
Yeah. So you're dealing with this in Belgium?
Yeah, it just so it's not. It also goes into effect of June in 2026, but they've made the announcement and it's going to happen. So there's a bunch of people leaving the country and finding ways to escape this tax and go to Dubai or just somewhere else that's not Europe, because it just seems like a lot of countries will be following the same thing.
Yeah, Natalie, let's get your take on this.
Yeah, it's something I wrote about this week in the news block. I hope everyone checks it out. I mean, it's straight up wealth confiscation, right? I mean, you're basically punished for doing what you're incentivized to do, which is seek yield and invest, because the currency is something you can't save in. So they're creating, investors and speculators out of all of us, and then punishing the ones who do it well. And what's really sad is it's also an infringement on property rights. If you can't own something and have it it be protected from these types of unrealized capital gains taxes, then do you really own it at all? And it's really sad to see. I mean, I was born in Europe, and to see so many countries on that continent move in this direction after, it hasn't been that long since World War II, and since we've been confronted with the forces of fascism and communism in Europe, and now we're moving back in that direction. I mean, that's pretty surprising to see. And I think that people will move with their feet and with their assets. We already saw an example of that in Norway when they passed a wealth tax. I think it was a couple years ago. They thought it would increase their revenue by hundreds of millions, and instead they lost over $500 million of revenue because billions fled to where their capital was respected and where their property rights were respected. So I think this is going to be a harsh lesson for the Netherlands. And I think that it's one that we hope we don't see across the pond here in the United States. But I also have heard different politicians, especially now since we have, populism kind of rising in the United States. We've seen some people flirt with these ideas as well. And I think it just shows a basic fundamental misunderstanding of economics, of property rights. And it's just the wrong reaction to a government that has been printing money and destroying our purchasing power. They're overspending, they're destroying our purchasing power. And the solution is not unrealized capital gains tax.
Yeah. And Sanjna, you're over in Europe right now. Why do you think Europe is predisposed to taking these drastic efforts?
Honestly, I don't know. I think it's also just the way Asia is moving is extremely significant. I think all these countries making moves like Dubai, where there's zero tax, the countries over there are just getting richer and richer, and over here, it's just a running joke that we have with our friends and people that we know. But in the past few years, the amount of people that have left Europe, the currency is weakening everywhere. People are just not enjoying the same life that they could a few years ago. It's just much harder to, be a business owner over here. People want to be an employee because it makes a lot more financial sense to work under someone and get that social security, get those benefits, get a high salary, but to actually work for yourself in a country like Belgium, and I know this is with other countries in Europe, it's extremely expensive. You're paying almost 50% in taxes. It's really hard to just register a company, to go through all that red tape and then to have to pay this amount in your tax. So it just makes sense now that people are leaving and want a better future and finding ways to not have to put all your earnings into paying taxes. So yeah, that's what I think. Belgium especially, I mean, it's always been really high tax, but I think at least like 70% of my friends have left the country. It's just not a place that people see a future for their kids, a future where they can make a lot of money and their savings actually grow. And yeah, people are finding ways out now, and people are just leaving.
They are leaving. They are voting with their feet, and they are going to places like Dubai, as you said. Number one country for millionaire flight last year was China. Number two was the UK, right? And I'm sure that Europe fills out a bunch of the rest of the countries underneath that. So let us hope that America does not fall prey to these, you could call them populist, right? Progressive ideas of taxation that just goes absolutely insane. But we'll see, because there's getting more and more calls for things like this. Another video I wanted to highlight that popped up over the weekend was this Erica Payne. She's the president of Patriotic Millionaires, and she calls for the IMF for a global asset registry, international limits on excessive wealth, and aggressive taxation to defend democracy. So you read that line and you think, okay, maybe she's got something there, but just listen to her voice and you can sort of feel where this is coming from. I got the video right here.
We have a beautiful opportunity in front of us, with the United States being such an unmitigated disaster as it currently is. Okay, so there is the opportunity, and within that opportunity, I would suggest three things. The first one, we have to have a global asset registry. We have to know who has the freaking money. And if they don't want you to know that they have the money or how much money they have, chances are they got it from somewhere they shouldn't have gotten it from, and they're spending it on something they shouldn't be spending it on. So number one, a global asset registry. Number two, we have to facilitate an international conversation about what is enough. And that if there is a number that is enough, there is a number that is too much. We believe that money becomes power, and when power threatens your democracy, you have to take away power, and the only way to take away that power is by taking away the money.
All right. Natalie, I would love to get your immediate reaction to that video right there. How does that make you feel when you hear this woman of patriotic millionaires speaking to the IMF?
It's just wild to see. I mean, they're upset about the outcomes of this fiat system, which they designed. And the consequences have created this very K-shaped, top-heavy economy where very few people hold a lot of the money and the power. But somehow they're going to punish everyone, right? They're going to create a digital surveillance system. They want to know everything you have. And oftentimes they literally end up going after people in the middle class, right? I mean, we recently heard those Venmo transactions that they're looking for of over $600, but they're really not going after the people in power anyway. But I just find it to be so ironic and so just detached from understanding how this entire system works. And no matter how much they tax, it's never enough. They're just going to find a way to spend more and more. They want to know everything that you have. And then who is going to be the rulers? Who decides who gets to do what with the money and who rules all of us, right? This is why I think Bitcoin is so phenomenal, because it's a system of rules without rulers. And you have to all play by the same opportunities, the same rules. No one gets a special advantage. No one can print money. And I think it would create a more level playing field for all of us where value would be rewarded as opposed to whoever's closest to the money printer. And it's just so sad to see people proposing these types of ideas that are tyrannical, really. I mean, they are, at the end of the day, they remove freedom. They remove our ability to own what we've earned and keep a sense of privacy. I think it's crazy to see it and to see people celebrating it.
Yeah. Sanjna, what's your reaction to that video?
I think Natalie said it perfectly. It almost feels like we're going backwards instead of forwards. And Bitcoin is actually the only solution where everyone is equal, right? They keep putting these things out in the media that they're trying to create equality by doing these things. But it just comes back to education, that there aren't enough people educated on Bitcoin to understand that this is equal money and this is what gives people equal power, not the current monetary system we're living in. And yeah, it's just ridiculous to see that we still have people who are trying to make Bitcoin seem like it's a punishment, but that's actually the solution of what we need in today's economy.
I just think it's also interesting that most people don't operate with, suitcases of cash. They operate within the current system that already has so much regulation in it, right? I mean, you're not going to buy a house in a back alley and exchange cash. You're doing it within a very, very regulated system where you have to, in many cases, reveal, what you're buying, how much it's for. Everything gets recorded. The same with stocks. Everything, in the form of these certificates is recorded somewhere. So they technically already have a registry. And yet, who are they going after? They're not going after the Epsteins. They're not going after the people that have all the power. They're going after the majority of people, which are good, hardworking people who don't do anything wrong. And we have our rights and privacy and our property rights infringed upon. So that they could do what with our money, right? I mean, it's just so wild. And I think that we need to make sure not to elect these types of policymakers into power and not give them a pedestal to brainwash people.
Yeah, and they always come up with the idea that they know what's best, right? And I think that's one thing that has always been with me since my youth is like, how do these politicians 3,000 miles away think that they know what's best to do to distribute resources or any of it? Just let us be. Human freedom is the best, and it allows people to thrive and fulfill their potential, where they think that they can just direct you and your money. And also what she said is that if you're not doing anything bad with your money, what do you have to hide? Well, hey, I mean, would she, like her bank statements, just broadcast out to the world, right? I don't think so. So let's we gotta step up. We gotta talk about these things more and more and more, because it's so important that we don't let the freedom that we have today be taken from us. And Bitcoin helps to reestablish that. And another thing that would really help establish all that is if Bitcoin becomes everyday money. And there's one company out there that's really doing a lot, especially in the last year, to help make that come true. We have Cash App. They just eliminated fees on Bitcoin buys over $2,000 and recurring purchases. They raised the withdrawal limits. That was a big complaint in the past, but now they're raising them for people who fulfill the requirements and are aiming to make Bitcoin everyday money. And as a little tidbit, over 50% of Americans aged 18 to 25 use Cash App on a monthly basis. That's pretty surprising. And we know that we need to go out and reach the youth. It's very important that we get Gen Z on the Bitcoin train. And I think Cash App is going to be an amazing ambassador to do just that. So, of course, we saw them turn on the Square merchants. They are able to accept Bitcoin. Over 4 million of them across the world can now accept Bitcoin with just a flip of a switch on their terminal. And that works perfectly with Cash App in this ecosystem. Of course, they are both companies that are under the umbrella of Jack Dorsey's Block. And now it's better than ever to use Bitcoin on a daily basis. So have you guys used spend Bitcoin on a Square merchant yet? Have you done this, Natalie?
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you travel. Some of the conferences that I've gone to, there are more circular economies there, like in Lugano or in El Salvador, where they want you to spend your Bitcoin. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. I have two reactions to this development. Number one, we really need to see a de minimis tax exemption, because right now, if you're in the US, you're supposed to be recording anytime that you spend your Bitcoin as a sale, and you have to report capital gains tax on it, which is super cumbersome. It's really difficult to try to, organize and record all of the different transactions and at what cost basis they were. So I really hope that Congress can come together and pass a de minimis exemption. Some countries actually have it up to $10,000, where anything below that you can spend without being taxed. And so it encourages people to actually use it as currency. The second thing is it all comes down to incentives. If there are more and more merchants who say, you know what, I not only accept Bitcoin, but maybe I'll give you a discount, or maybe I only accept Bitcoin. You can't even pay in fiat. That's going to encourage people to use Bitcoin more as a medium of exchange. And what I think is needed is just more adoption and more education, because merchants who understand Bitcoin obviously want to accumulate it themselves. They're not going to want to accept fiat. They're going to want you to pay in Bitcoin. And I think those numbers are going to continue to grow. But it's been so exciting to see how many merchants have been onboarded. These tools make it very, very easy. And when you're buying in Bitcoin, it's actually really fun too, because I've done a lot of sales for my book in Bitcoin. I use a Speed app, and you just you hear that little ping, and it's gone through no middleman, no bank in the middle, no intermediary, no delays, no fees. It's just amazing to use Bitcoin.
Absolutely. And Sanjna, are you using Bitcoin? Do you buy anything with your BTC?
So again, in Europe, it's a little different. I'm just holding forever. But I think, of course, finally some good news in Bitcoin. This also just makes a big difference for women, right? I think this highly affects women who usually face higher financial literacy gaps or risk aversion in investing, and they could really benefit from user-friendly, low-cost features, making it easier for younger women to dip into the Bitcoin space without having to pay all these fees and just put their small investments or savings into an app like this. It also normalizes using just crypto and Bitcoin in everyday life and everyday finance. It's something we also teach through the course that I created for Rhino for women in Bitcoin, and it's just giving examples that apps like these exist, features like these exist, and it's not as scary and as intimidating for women to get in, because from what they know or what they've seen, it's just been news and platforms like FTX, and it's all the negative media that is usually shown, but it's never good headlines like this that are shown. So I think this is something that needs to be shown more to women, and also something that they should be aware of and see the positive sides of Bitcoin and how they can use it.
Yes, I do think that using Bitcoin, spending it on things is one of the most important things you can do as a Bitcoiner. Bitcoin needs velocity. If everybody just has it sitting there forever, then is it really money, right? We need to use it in the real world. It really opens people's eyes and lights up their face when they can actually buy something with Bitcoin. That is the magic. It is peer-to-peer money. So go out and use it. And I would say if you don't have any Bitcoin, you need to get some Bitcoin. And that's why we are talking about Rhino. Rhino is one of the sponsors of this show, and we are so thankful for them because they are really setting a new bar in terms of Bitcoin financial services. Before, Bitcoin finances has been slow, clunky, dispersed across multiple apps, but Rhino is changing that. They're a next generation Bitcoin banking app designed to handle all of your Bitcoin needs in one place. With Bitcoin, of course, with Rhino, you can buy Bitcoin at some of the lowest fees anywhere. More sats for every dollar. Make payments on the Lightning Network instantaneous, near zero fees. Send cash globally. If you got friends or family in another country, send them cash over Bitcoin rails using Rhino. And of course, you can DCA on your own schedule, set up automatic savings so you can stack sats on your schedule and build wealth over time. And soon with Rhino, you'll be able to pay bills, direct deposit, borrow against your Bitcoin, and even save for retirement all inside the app. No questions asked. And of course, security is a top priority. Rhino protects your Bitcoin with biometric verification, 24/7 fraud protection, and the confidence of knowing your Bitcoin is never, ever rehypothecated. And for long-term users who have a multi-sig setup with Casa, you can use Rhino as one of your keys in your multi-sig. So go today. Go to rhinobitcoin.com. Download the app. Of course, it's on Apple or Android. Use the code Bitcoin News, and they'll drop you $10 of Bitcoin into your wallet. No questions asked, just for getting started. So Rhino, huge fans of the program, huge fans of the app. Go to their X, check them out, send them a DM. You got any questions? They're more than willing to help you out. Very nice. All right, let's bring our guest back onto the stage. And I next want to talk about what is going on over here with Quantum. So we've got Nick Carter. He's a longtime Bitcoiner, but he's definitely ruffled some feathers over the years. And recently, he's been talking a lot about the quantum threat to Bitcoin. And he came out with a video this last week that actually raised a lot of eyebrows. So let's pull that up and love to get your guys' reaction on the other side of this quick video.
Well, I'll tell you what I think is going to happen, and I don't want to scare anyone. I think the devs will probably continue to do nothing. They say that there's some stuff happening. There's not a lot. And I think the big institutions that now exist in Bitcoin, they didn't before. They didn't in the 2x scaling wars debate. They were basically no institutions. They will get fed up, and they will, for lack of a better word, fire the devs and put in new devs. If you're BlackRock and you have billions of dollars of client assets in this thing and this problem's not being addressed, what choice do you have? So I think this, if unaddressed by the devs organically, would lead to a corporate takeover, a successful one.
So Natalie, you are talking to people on Wall Street all the time about Bitcoin. And we've heard it this year that some of these fund managers, they want out because they're scared of quantum. They're putting a discount on Bitcoin because Q-Day might pop up at any time. They're not sure when. Is this a common thread that you hear with these big Wall Street players?
I think that a lot of people are concerned because quantum is something very few people understand, right? This is something that goes highly, highly technical. And so a lot of people are really putting their trust in those who have some type of background in those technologies. And right now, I think that there's a lot of fear mongering. I mean, Bitcoin is at the end of the day consensus based. We've seen debates happen in the past, obviously the biggest being in 2017 when we reached the block size war. And no one said we won't have something like that again in the future. And it might be over a hard fork when quantum is or is not a threat. I want you guys to remember, though, that all the research I've done, we're still years away from this actually being a legitimate risk to Bitcoin security. We just, the amount of qubits that are needed to crack anything related to Bitcoin right now are very, very far away. That's not to say that it can't happen sooner. Obviously, computing is advancing very, very quickly, especially with artificial intelligence. But when I speak to the people who I respect and admire the most, folks that have been, analysts in the space for many, many years, they're really not as worried. They think a solution will be out there for us to consider, for us to reach consensus on. I mean, obviously the incentives work in our favor, right? I mean, anyone who has a lot of money tied up in Bitcoin, even if it's institutions, they're not going to want to see Bitcoin fail. So I am not as concerned about it as I think some in the public are, but that doesn't mean that we can't just, we should just lay on our backs and not do anything about it, or not research, or not take these risks seriously. I just think that right now, be careful about some of the fear mongering, because I think that a lot of it's out there, and not in the case of Nick at all, because I think Nick is actually very, very very well read and understands this subject. But other people I've seen are scaremongering, and they're saying like, hey, I have a solution for you. I have this quantum resistant altcoin. So be careful about that. Know where the information's coming from. Follow the motives, follow the agenda. And I think this is something that's a developing conversation, and I don't think it's an immediate threat.
Yes, and we are taking actions towards making a solution. BIP360 was merged into Bitcoin's GitHub repository to address quantum risks, introducing Pay to Merkle Root, a quantum-resistant output type that removes Taproot's vulnerable key path spend. So there are devs out there. Nick has commonly said that the devs don't care anything about this, but no, we got Hunter Beast. He's leading this charge for BIP360, and this addresses some of the biggest problems that we have in terms of the quantum threat for Bitcoin. So the devs are making moves, and we'll see. Of course, in order for this to protect your Bitcoin needs to be moved to new addresses that are quantum resistant, and that will take time for the whole entire network to migrate over. But this is a conversation that should be happening now, and I think it did take some people causing a stink in order for it to really get to the top of the list here. But now we are finally talking about it, and there are actionable moves being taken by devs to address it. So, Sanjna, I was wondering if you have looked into the quantum threat to Bitcoin and what you think is going on here.
Yeah, so again, I think there's a lot of noise for no reason. Yes, quantum computing is a risk, but like Natalie said, it'll take years. And okay, fine, with AI, it's possible faster than ever. But if you think about it in the bigger picture, Bitcoin's not been around for so long, and how many developments have we had already, right? So there is going to be a way, developers are going to find a way to make this safe, to make this quantum computing resistant. And I think the biggest advantage is that it's so decentralized, right? We have to give all these developers a chance to find a way to keep coming up with new solutions and fighting any risk or fighting any threat from bigger companies to take over or say that Bitcoin isn't there for the long run because of AI and because quantum computing can take over. But I think there's always going to be a solution, and there's always going to be someone trying to fight Bitcoin and say that, look, this isn't the reason it can work, or this is another threat, or they're just scaring the people and the public and the people who, of course, are not as well read in Bitcoin or don't have as much technical knowledge to just say that this isn't an asset you should be putting your money in.
Yeah, it does seem as if Bitcoin throughout its whole entire history has had to deal with FUD, of course. We dealt with the ESG energy FUD for a good 5+ years, and that seems to have been beaten, especially as the data centers for AI consume way more electricity than Bitcoin does. And now we're dealing with, I think, quantum FUD and also criminal FUD. I think that's definitely in the headlines a bunch, that whether it be for ransomware or the attacks you're seeing in France, Bitcoin tied to criminality is another area that we will need to combat as a community in the years ahead. But speaking of Bitcoin and technology, we also had a big breakthrough this last week with Lightning Labs. They released an open source toolkit enabling autonomous AI agents to operate natively on the Bitcoin Lightning Network, allowing instant micropayments without traditional sign-up barriers. So this has been a common idea here. So agents have really exploded just within the last month or so with the introduction of Claude Bot. But these agents need to be able to have economic power and be able to buy things and pay for themselves in some regards. Now, Lightning Labs is opening that up to them. This integration enables agents to perform instant programmatic micropayments without the traditional hurdles of identity verification, API keys, or manual sign-up flows. The release provides 7 modular skills that create a full stack financial environment for software, infrastructure, authorization, automation, and just absolutely amazing stuff happening over here in Lightning Labs. And that is the hope that Bitcoin can become the native currency of the internet, not just for humans, but also for the AI agents that work for us. Yes. So would love to get your guys' comments. And yes, Natalie, I know you might have to run real quick, but please would love to get your comments on this. And if you must leave, by all means, totally understand.
I love this news. I think it's so exciting. I love what Elizabeth Stark has done with Lightning Labs and all of her contributions to the space. We do need for AI to basically embrace Bitcoin as digital money. And one thing that I mentioned in a recent news hit that I did last week at Bitcoin Investor Week was that if you type into most AI platforms, hey, what's the best store of value and form of money for AI agents to spend and receive? Most of them say Bitcoin. And it makes sense, right? Because you don't need a bank account, you don't need APIs, you don't need all the things that you typically need with other forms of money. You can't, AIs are not going to send gold. Okay. I can promise you that. And a lot of the other tokens, they just aren't secure enough. So even AI recognizes that Bitcoin is that permissionless ledger that they would want to use. And with things like Lightning, you can do it on this even faster layer with little to no fees. So I think it's extraordinary. I think this is the future. And I think this will also be one of the catalysts that pushes Bitcoin. Because right now there has been a lot of excitement and news and development surrounding AI, but that means that people have been almost distracted away from Bitcoin. And when these two forces converge, I think that people will appreciate again even more the use cases for Bitcoin as we transition into this era of digital intelligence, which we will all be using to be more productive. So very exciting news and congratulations to Lightning Labs.
Cheers. Absolutely. So yes, if you have to run, by all means, Sanjna and I will close out the show. But once again, we just want to give a shout out to the Women of Bitcoin Summit coming March 4th and 5th. Thank you
so much for having me. I hope to see all of you March 4th and 5th. We've got phenomenal speakers. It's open to everyone. Again, it's free. We hope it's the first of many. And I just want to give a big shout out to our sponsors and for Christine Marie Turner of Abundant Minds. They're our platinum sponsor. Just so grateful that they came up with the idea for this. And Efrat and I are so excited to be co-organizing it with her. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Natalie. It's been great to have you. Cheers. So, Sanjna, in terms of AI, are you using it? I mean, you do have a technical background, so I'd love to hear what you're doing with AI.
Yeah, I'm also from that generation where, AI is everything. I use it for work. I use it for just daily life. I use it for how to manage my kids. And AI is great. The more prompts you give it, the more efficient it gets. So finally, in some good news, we're seeing AI and Bitcoin merge in a positive way. It's enabling new use cases like microtransactions for content or services, expanding Bitcoin beyond holding to just practical utility, which could really drive value and adoption. I think, again, like a lot of my generation, a lot of women are using AI, and this is just a way to make your life more efficient, to make it easier. Yes, it can be a threat, but I think if used in the right way, if using it to your advantage, if you're using it to educate yourself more, then it's only going to expand everything you can do rather than threat what you're doing right now. So I'm a big fan of AI. I see Bitcoin and AI, just working together and making a lot of transformations in the space. Rather than hearing threats and all this negativity surrounding Bitcoin, I don't think there's as much bad as good that it can do.
It is great. We're using it every single day, of course, but it's funny how AI is supposed to make your life easier, but it just seems that the more you use AI, the more things you can do, the more you want to do, right? So you just get even busier.
Exactly. But it's great, right? I think now the fact that you can just create your own app within a matter of hours and what you needed like a whole lot of money investment in developers to do that before. So yes, it can make your life much easier, but the amount you have to learn in a shorter time is just it's so significant, and it's so much nicer to be able to do things where it would otherwise take hours and a lot of money to do.
Yes, and it's creating a world of abundance in terms of information and the skills that are deployable by these AI agents. So you need something that is scarce, and Bitcoin is the only verifiably scarce asset that we have. So it just makes the case for Bitcoin even more that in a world of absolute abundance created by AI, you need a scarce resource to preserve your wealth. Now let's look over here to the market section where block fills. So we've been waiting to see some bodies float up to the surface after the 10-10 liquidation and then the 2-5 event where we saw Bitcoin crash down to $60,000 before rebounding up to 70. But this might be one of the culprits here. Block fills, a Susquehanna-backed crypto lender with $60 billion in 2025 crypto volume, suspends deposits and withdrawals, citing market volatility, reviving memories of 2022's FTX-driven contagion. So yes, this could be one of the big players that gets blown up from the last couple of months of market action. Do you think that the bottom is in here, Sanjna, or do you think that we got more downward price action to go for Bitcoin in the months ahead?
I think we're close to the bottom, but I do see one more crash happening in 2026. It could be in 1 or 2 months, or it could be more towards the end of the year. It is going to go up before it goes down. I can't say what price, but my predictions are it's going to go anywhere between 40 to 50,000. Again, this shouldn't cause fear. It shouldn't cause any uncertainty with Bitcoin. It's just one more reason for you to buy more and stack more sats. But yeah, it's based a lot on global factors. If you see the stock market, you see the economy in general, everything's a little down. The cycles happen, volatility happens. It's just a part of Bitcoin. But I see them the next 2 or 3 years being great for Bitcoin and reaching new highs. So nothing to worry about.
Yeah, nothing to worry about. I think it would be kind of surprising if we did go down to 40 from here. That would be quite the shock to some people. I think, in my personal opinion, us just treading water here around 60, 70 for the next 3 or 4 months would frustrate a lot of people, and I think cause a lot more rage quits. And then you can mark the real bottom once a few more people flee because they got bored or they've given up. But it's Bitcoin rewards those with patience, as we've seen over time. And you got to begin it to win it. Of course, the biggest moves in Bitcoin only happen on around 10 days a year. So if you're not in Bitcoin for those 10 days, you miss it. And we don't want to miss it. No, we want to be in it. One guy who's definitely in it is Saylor. And Saylor told CNBC last week that Strategy can withstand a Bitcoin price drawdown to $8,000 and still have sufficient assets to fully cover its debt. So, of course, when Bitcoin goes down, you hear a lot of rumors that Strategy is in trouble, that Saylor is going to be liquidated, when, of course, none of this is true, even though the Bitcoin price might be lower than his average acquisition cost. It does not mean that he is in any risk of not being able to fulfill his debt obligations. They've got about $8 billion worth of debt, and they've got around $50 billion worth of Bitcoin. So, and they've, of course, got $2 billion worth of cash sitting in their cash reserve now. So that's enough to cover the dividends for their preferred stocks for the next 2 years. Do you follow the Bitcoin treasury company space, Sanjna? And what do you think is going on with Saylor and Strategy at the moment?
So Saylor's obviously on a mission to probably hold the most Bitcoin from anyone in the world. But like I said, like he said as well, even if Bitcoin crashes to 8,000, they'd still be able to cover all debts without forced sales. It's a reassurance to investors with the recent dip that you just have to be bullish in the long term and be prepared for volatility. It also exemplifies the corporate hodling strategy, right? This could inspire more firms to adopt Bitcoin treasuries, to just keep buying on the dip. And I don't think there should be any fear. it's never realistically going to drop to 8K. It's going to stay around this range, like you said. And as we experience a few lows, we're just going to experience higher highs as well. So yeah, no fear over there at all.
Yeah, Saylor is certainly the man in the arena, and people like to throw tomatoes when they sense the man in the arena is down on his back. But I think that he's got the wherewithal, the smarts, and the Bitcoin stack to withstand this drawdown, and even one further down to, say, 40K, as you said, it might just happen in this year ahead. The question is, what is going to happen with some of these other Bitcoin treasury companies? As we saw this last week, another pivot, Congo, which transitioned into Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin treasury over the last 2 years. They sold 4,451 Bitcoin, worth $305 million, to fund a strategic pivot into AI infrastructure, highlighting how mining firms are transitioning toward higher growth compute markets amid shifting industry economics. It has been a tough year for the Bitcoin miners, as Bitcoin mining difficulty is near all-time highs before the last week, where it dropped 11%, giving them some relief. But it's tough out there, and we're seeing a lot of these Bitcoin miners transition into AI compute. Do you think that the mining industry is going to look the same as it does today in the years ahead, or are we going to see a much more decentralized Bitcoin mining industry focused on more stranded energy in the future?
So I think it's comparable to the bigger crypto space in general, where there will be much fewer players in the game. Again, it was a lot of hype the past few years. There's a lot of miners who've entered this industry, but I think we're going to see a lot of people just stepping out, like making a transition into AI. It's going to be the same in AI, where everything gets pretty saturated, and there's going to be a few players left. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where the space takes us in the next couple of years. Definitely think it's going to be more decentralized and just have fewer players in the space.
Yeah, I think that this era that we see ourselves in right now, with these giant warehouse-sized Bitcoin mining farms, might be a historical oddity, and that in the future we're going to see much more decentralized, smaller mines around the world based on where you can get the cheapest energy, and that's usually not near city centers or these big manufacturing warehouses. It's out in the sticks, right? Getting stranded natural gas or using renewables, of course. And that this industry is going to change dramatically in the years ahead, as a lot of these Bitcoin miners transition into high performance compute, and the Bitcoin mining industry gets spread out to the edges. Yes. And we got another story I'd like to talk about here. China instructs banks to sell U.S. treasuries and limit new purchases amid concerns that U.S. debt may expose them to sharp volatility, signaling that a potential shift away from dollar-denominated reserves is in the works. Of course, we've seen China cut their treasury holdings nearly in half since the mid-2010s, and now they are getting even more explicit with their instructions to banks that, hey, we don't want you piling into U.S. debt anymore. So, Sanjna, what do you think is going on here? Do you think that we are seeing a decoupling between the U.S. and China, both from an economic and manufacturing standpoint?
Yeah, and I think this is huge. It's huge news that one of the biggest countries like China is taking such a move. I think other countries could follow. I think we always knew that the U.S. Bitcoin reserve would shift, to either another currency, or, okay, the Bitcoiners will say Bitcoin in just a matter of time. But I think it's going to happen sooner than later, especially if countries like China take such steps. There's a lot of political tension between both countries. It's definitely going to weaken the dollar dominance, potentially boosting alternatives like Bitcoin as a neutral reserve amid all the global tensions that are currently happening. But yeah, I mean, this gives way for another currency like Bitcoin to come in. At this point, we don't really see what other currency could take over after the US dollar. So it's it could be good news. You never know. But I think there's just been so much tension between China and the US, and with the US, implementing all these tariffs with other countries around the world as well, it's just causing more heat and more tension. So it's only a matter of time that countries would follow.
Yeah, it does seem as if the world is transitioning to neutral reserve assets, whether that be gold over for the East, for the BRICS countries, and maybe over here in America, we want to go with Bitcoin. The majority of Bitcoin is held by Americans, or Americans constitute the largest group of Bitcoin holders. And so it would benefit America if we were to transition to that as our main reserve asset. Interesting. We'll see how it all plays out, but the tension is certainly high. And I do think that America and China are going to have an interesting decade, if not decades ahead of us as we enter into this AI world. But before we get into our last story here, I do want to give a big shout out to our friends over at Arch. Who is Arch? Arch is the leading destination for Bitcoin-backed loans. Arch provides world-class security and white glove service so you never have to sell your Bitcoin. If you're listening to the show right here, you've done the hard part. You stacked through highs and lows. You held and you did not panic sell when we just crashed to 60K. But still, real life happens. You got taxes, new opportunities. Say you want to put a down payment on a house, just a big purchase in general. But you don't want to sell your Bitcoin because that just feels wrong. This is where Arch comes in. Think of it like a flexible line of credit with rates starting as low as 8.5% APR. You borrow what you need, repay anytime, and only pay interest on what you use, all without triggering a tax event. The best part, the Bitcoin stays yours. Arch has a strict no rehypothecation policy, so your collateral is never lent out. It's held in a qualified, insured, bankruptcy remote custody with full transparency. So yeah, if you want to get some cash today for your Bitcoin, it's actually a great time to probably do it. Bitcoin's already crashed 50%. So you have a much better opportunity to get a loan that will, of course, will never be called for liquidation because I don't think Bitcoin's going to go down that much more from here. So get your cash today at archlending.com. That's archlending.com. Very nice. Cool. Sanjna, I want to bring you back up on stage because we got some more stories to talk about. Speaking of a strategic Bitcoin reserve over here in America, Brazil reintroduces a bill to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve with authorization to acquire up to 1 million Bitcoin, joining the growing list of nations exploring sovereign Bitcoin holdings. So this popped up on the radar last year, seems to have been put back in the closet for a little bit, but now we're here. They are talking about it once again in the parliament in Brazil. Do you think Brazil could lead the charge with a strategic Bitcoin reserve of 1 million Bitcoin?
Yeah, for sure. Just following countries like El Salvador in good news, we have this continent doing the right things. But it's great because it normalizes nation state adoption. It could spark a reserve race, elevating Bitcoin status globally. And Brazil's one of the biggest countries in South America. So again, other countries are just gonna, follow and they're leading a great example. I think everything happening in El Salvador is positive. We've seen a lot of positive changes. We like to believe that all these the rate of violence, criminal activity, all of that has gone down. More businesses are moving to El Salvador. So it's on an economical and political level, just a beneficial thing to do this. And Brazil doing it, I think, will just make a lot of other countries adopt and like I said, will be the lead example that other countries follow by what Brazil does as well. Yeah, no,
it's an interesting time in Latin America. There seems to be a sort of right-wing shift. We just saw, of course, in Argentina, Chile, Costa Rica, a bunch of elections have gone to right-wing populists following the influence, I think, of Bukele and the way that he's cleaned up his country. And of course, he has the example of Bitcoin to share with the rest of Latin America. It'll be interesting to see what Brazil does. 1 million Bitcoin is no joke. If they hopped right into the strategic Bitcoin reserve race with that much, they would be a top player, no doubt. And I mean, they are an economic powerhouse. So it would be interesting to see if Latin America can lead the way when it comes to Bitcoin. Very nice. Well, Sanjna, this brings us to the end of our hour. I want to thank you so much for joining on with us today. Again, let's give a big shout out to what you're doing with Rhino in terms of women's Bitcoin education and the summit coming up.
Thank you so much, Rob. It was great being on. Great speaking to you and Natalie. And yeah, I hope to speak to you soon again.
Absolutely. So yes, the Women of Bitcoin Summit is coming up March 4th and 5th. Go and sign up today and go check out what Sanjna is doing with women's Bitcoin education over on rhinobitcoin.com. They got a whole section of the site devoted just to that. So thank you so much for tuning in to today's version of the Daily Stack. I'm your host, Rob Wallace. We got another show coming up in about 15 minutes time. So hold on. We're going to play some music in the transition, and we'll get you coming up next with some more Daily Stack content. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. This has been Rob Wallace. Until next time, so long. Bye-bye.